before all the work you do today, what was it like for you to go through this experience as parents?
Hmm. Well, I didn't know any differently, to be honest. I had my first son was very hyperactive. He was always on the roof or doing something very, very dangerous, which people would be like, "Oh my God, your son's on the roof," and I was like, isn't that normal? Like, I didn't know any differently. Um, then I had my daughter, super sensitive. My youngest was really the one that I knew when he was born wasn't really making eye contact. He was different than the other two. The other two would wake up happy. He was always mad. He was mad at everyone. He'd come home from school like, I hate this person. And later on, when he was a young teenager, Rob kind of started this idea of this program. And it was just one small office in town. It wasn't the program it is now. And I put him in for 6 months. And we did, the whole family was gluten free, casein free. We did everything. We did the exercises. And I remember one day, like, he just kind of like grabbed my arm and he was like, "Mom, are you okay?" And my daughter and I kind of, oh my God, he never had that kind of empathy. And I always say as a mother, like, we know they're intelligent, what they want to do in life, that's up to them. But to know that they will love or feel love is the only thing that matters. And he's so far my only one that's married, so I guess it worked out pretty good. And he works in Rob's office, and he's great with kids. So
yeah, I think for me it was, I could see that my kids were very gifted in certain areas. They were pretty talented at certain things, but they all had different struggles and other things, and that kind of confused me. I was like, why would that be? I don't understand. Are we doing something wrong? Or, that was something that I had more questions about. And then parents would come to me in my practice and start telling me about the same type of things they were seeing in their kids. And they would have a label like ADHD. And I really didn't know what that was in the brain. And then I started doing research into it. And that's kind of what got me going in this direction. And that understanding that there was some sort of unevenness there. And I really didn't know a lot about milestones at that point. We didn't really know because we weren't given a lot of that information. When a child should roll over, when they should crawl, when they should walk, when they should talk. Are they important? No one was saying anything to us, just like most people now don't know. Looking back, I know that those milestones are hugely important. Every little step matters significantly. And when you look back, I could see that some of our kids didn't always hit those milestones the way they were supposed to. And I wish someone had been there to say to me, hey, that's a red flag and maybe there's something we can do about it. But a lot of parents will say to me, how do I know? And if there's some sort of developing imbalance, and a lot of it has to do with, are they pretty good at certain things, or maybe even really good at certain things and really struggle in other areas. That is kind of the identification of some sort of imbalance. And so for me, that's kind of what got me curious from the beginning as to what was going on and what could explain that.
What do you think is most difficult for a family when they don't understand what's going on with their child?
I think the most difficult thing is listening to your pediatrician say it's normal, he's a late bloomer, she'll be fine, and knowing deep down inside there's something wrong. And then between the parents not being on the same page, where I'm not saying it's always the mother, but usually the mother saying, no, we need to go outside and find somebody else. And then it gets costly, and that's always an issue. And there's, for a mother, it's an internal struggle, and it's hard in a marriage, and it's hard. I mean, thank God Rob does what he does, but I feel for the parents that are searching out there and not getting the right answers, and just like living with that pit in their stomach that they could be doing something more, but they don't know how. They're not getting validation.
Yeah, and that's the reason I wrote my books primarily, was to be able to give people real resources and answers, give them real practical tools that they could use at home, because as Carolyn says, we as family, as parents early on, weren't really given any clear answers. And that's where, for me, I felt like I have a responsibility to do this. And actually, this really all started with my wife, because there was this woman who had this organization that she started in our town. And her son had a very severe ADHD issue, maybe even slight autism spectrum. And she had a fundraiser in her house to raise money for this organization. And Carolyn went, and I was working. And she invited that woman back to our home because the woman came up to her and she knew I was doing something in this area, or that, you know, I did this kind of holistic type of practice. And she was searching for answers. And my wife is very empathetic. She felt for this woman, and she said, well, maybe you can talk to my husband. Maybe he can give you some insight. He does a lot of things with diet and nutrition and, you know, exercises and neurology, and he knows a lot about the brain. So I walk into the house one night at about 9 o'clock at night after I was done with my patients, and she's sitting at the kitchen table and she's crying. And my wife introduces me, says, Rob, this is Denise. She had the fundraiser last night, and she's really frustrated because she's really trying to help her son, and it's really difficult, and she feels like she's not getting any answers. And I told her maybe she could talk to you. Maybe you can help her. So I said to my wife, I said, Denise, nice to meet you. Can I talk to her for a second? So I brought her over into a room, and I said, you know, I'm coming in at 9 o'clock at night. I'm doing lectures on the weekend. You know, you're sometimes mad at me that I'm not here as much as I could be with our kids. And I'm like, this is a whole nother thing you want me to take on. I feel for this woman, but I don't really know what ADHD is. I'm not really, I don't know if I can help her. And she said to me, I understand. And yes, I understand you're busy already, but I just have a feeling that this is something you're supposed to do. This is someone you're supposed to help. She said, I don't understand why. I get emotional when I talk about this because I don't even know if you remember this that much.
I know. I'm trying to think. I can't remember yesterday.
But I remember she said to me that this is something you are meant to do. And I don't know why or how I know that, but I just know that you have to do something with this. So I said, okay, as long as you're not going to get mad at me, I'm happy to do it. And then a few days later, we went to a parent-teacher meeting. And the teacher sat us down, and the first thing she said was, I don't know how to explain this to you, but I think your son might have something like hyperactivity or attention issues. And we were shocked. I said, why do you say that? She said, well, he's really bright. He's really wonderful child, but he can't sit when everybody else is sitting, and he's always moving around, and he talks a lot. And so now I'm sitting there as a professional that supposedly knows a lot about the brain, and I feel, okay, how do I not know this in my own son? I have these other people telling me about their kids.
But again, we thought it was normal. We were young.
We didn't know. A lot of parents,
There were no like ADD labels. There was no autism. It was nothing. There's nothing. We just thought, you know, he was one of those kids that he couldn't help like. We just thought it was annoying, really. Like we didn't know that was.
He was energetic boy.
Condition, but
right. And I remember thinking, as a lot of parents, you know, is it my fault, or because I'm not there all the time and I'm working a lot? But then I remember her saying to me that you're supposed to do something with this. Like this is, and I literally took it as a message that, okay, I need to figure out what's happening with my son and Denise's son, and I need to find the answer to this. And the first question I asked was, what is it? What's happening in the brain? I already knew a lot about the brain. I would go to other doctors and therapists and pediatricians, and they were friends of mine and colleagues of mine. And I said, what is ADHD? What's happening in the brain? And they looked at me and they went, I don't know. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. I said, well, okay. And they said, why do you ask that? And I said, well, because I was just told my son might have an issue. And they said, well, you can't do anything about it. I said, wait, you just told me you don't know what it is, but you're really clear that you can't do anything about it? And they said, yeah, well, that's what we're taught. And I was like, well, that's pretty stupid, actually. It doesn't really make much sense. And that really kind of started me on this whole journey to find those answers and to be able to give those answers to other parents so they didn't have to go through
Well, we
what
were
we
also
went through.
starting to notice that it was becoming way more popular. Other people's kids were experiencing, like it was almost like a phenomenon. Like it all just kind of blew up. All
It was
these
an
kids
epidemic.
were all of a sudden hyperactive and not so much autistic to the extent that you see now, like nonverbal, more like high functioning autism. But then it just got more and more and more and more. And so, I mean, Rob got in at the right time because he started with the very first signs of it and now can really treat anything because it's all one side of the brain or the other, or sometimes mixed. I'm not a doctor, but yeah.
After so many years of working with families, what changes have you seen not only in children but in parents as well?
Well, changes, tremendous happiness, um, tremendous unification of the mother and the father because, like I said before, a lot of the times the mother is looking for other types of technique, to fix the child, and it doesn't work. And this goes on and on. To find Rob, usually you've gone through many, many channels that haven't worked to find him because he's not, like in the United States, he's not pharmaceutically based. I don't know if I could say that, but, so they don't promote you as much. And it's a problem in the marriage. A lot of single moms with kids that have issues because the father just isn't on board. I don't mean to put there's some wonderful fathers out there, but I see that when they both see the change in their children going through the program, I feel like it's like you really see it in the family as a unit. It really makes a really big difference, and that brings me joy.
Yeah.
That brings me joy.
Yeah, I think one of the things it does, obviously, it brings hope, and it reduces a lot of the stress. And as we said, I mean, 85% of families with an autistic child will end up in divorce because it tears families apart, and this brings them back together. And what we emphasize in my second book, Reconnected Kids, I talk about a family plan with values and goals, and we talk about how important it is for both parents to be on the same page. We're not, when you get married, people don't say to you, hey, well, you should sit down and really discuss about having kids and what your goals are and what your expectations are and what you would like your children to, be and dream about and what you would want to. They may be completely different, conflicting visions of what the future is going to look like. And not that either one is wrong or right. It's just different. Even something as simple as making sure that there are consequences when a child does something wrong.
And both parents are on the same page because one can't give consequences and the other one's like, no, it's okay. So that's, I think, a very big problem. And listen, we're not perfect. We went through these problems and conflicts in our marriage, and that's why we can say, be on the same page, because it's not good when you're not on the same page. And that's really the most important thing. They go through the program, just in life in general, if you're on the same page, it makes a big difference, and it takes a little more work, but it's worth it.
Just something as simple as sitting down. One of the things that's most difficult as a parent, when a child does something, first of all, having rules, having clear rules, even written rules, where the family has rules that, okay, we've all agreed upon these rules. And then when a child breaks that rule in some way, there needs to be some consequence. And that's something that is being lost. A lot of families don't do that. But how do you choose that? Like if I'm home with my kids and they do something and my teenage son comes in the door later than they're supposed to, what's the punishment? What's the right punishment for that? Or what's the right consequence? If I'm there by myself and they walk in that door, I have to come up with this on my own. Okay, what am I going to do? Because I didn't have a preparation. And then if she's there by herself, she has to do the same. So even discussing, okay, well, what would be the consequence in a situation like that? What would you do? What would I do? What would be fair? Someone may walk in and I may say, look at them and say, hey, you're late. And they go up the stairs and say, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. They may come in with her and she may be like, you're late. You are grounded tomorrow. And with the same infraction, completely different consequences. And now the child is confused. They don't know what the rules are. They don't know, like, okay, you know, what to expect. That creates anxiety in them. They don't really, they may start pitting the parents against one another. And so just having simple, like, written rules and parents saying, okay, what would be the consequence? Lots of times even asking the child, what would be a proper consequence? And they'll tell you, take my phone away from me for a day or two. That would work, right? And they'll tell you what to do. But just having these conversations is so powerful.
Well, there's a neurological component to a lot of the kids, that whether it's a left side problem or a right side problem, but then there's a behavioral component. And sometimes parents blame it on the neurological, oh, well, you know, I had to give him the phone because he's acting up, or I had to give him candy, and then the kid starts acting up more because they know the bigger, you know, scene they make, the faster they get. So that's not neurological, that's behavioral. So that's on the parent, and it's hard. It's hard when you feel badly for your kid not to want to give them something right away.
Especially when they have a disability and
yeah,
you feel
it's really hard.
And you feel like everything is hard for them.
But in the long run, it doesn't help them, because then it becomes a behavioral issue. So, and you see some of these parents, they're like amazing, you know, they're amazing. But I do feel that is very important to have. You know, right now, I don't know if it's in Mexico, they have gentle parenting where you never say it, and it's so bad. It's really not going to help these kids at all. Kids need boundaries, they need consequences, they need really a completely formed idea of how they're supposed to behave, even out in public, or else they're lost, you know. So
one of the most important skills that I think a parent can teach a child to become a fully functioning adult is something called resilience. And resilience is an area in the brain, primarily in the right side of the brain. There's also part of it is in the left hemisphere. And resilience is brought on in the brain and taught through being pushed outside of your comfort zone, being uncomfortable. And if a parent is always making sure that a child is never uncomfortable, that they're always doing everything for them, or they never make them feel uncomfortable by giving them a consequence, what you're doing is you're not building resilience. And resilience is the antidote for trauma. The lower your level of resilience, the easier you become traumatized. And so what you don't realize is that by not making your child work hard, by not, setting boundaries, or by maybe making them have consequences when they're upset, or making them do their homework, or making them do chores in the house. My wife was always great with that. She always was like, our kids had to do. And if you don't do that, what you're doing is you're setting them up for failure later on in life. And especially if they have areas of their brain that are delayed and are not, and it's harder to develop those areas that will build resistance, but you're also leaving them more vulnerable to being traumatized. And you see that. You see a lot of the young generation, they get triggered so easily by the littlest thing. They have one bad interaction in their office, and they literally will come in and say, I'm traumatized and I need 2 weeks off because my psychiatrist says that I've been traumatized. And it's, that all really starts a lot in parenting and being on the same page and being able to be strong And listen, she was a lot stronger than me. I would give in
That was
easily,
tough.
and she'd
That
be
was tough.
like, no, don't you dare give in. And I was more afraid of getting in trouble with her than, than anything. So it really is all about that parenting style.
What have you learned as parents that you wish you had known from the beginning?
Oh boy, so much. I mean, so much. I think it would have been even stricter in some areas and maybe less strict in other areas. I think I would have, that's a hard one because I never want to think that there's something I regret because everything I did for my children or with my children was out of love. But certainly now there's so much more information out there. I wish I had that information. But for the most part, maybe I would have pushed them more into the areas that I thought that they would really excel at um, instead of going with what their school did, or maybe take them even more out of the box, which we have very artistic kids. I think I would have pushed it even more. But I don't know. That's a hard question because
I mean, I think I would have liked to know a lot of what I've written books about, I say that from a standpoint of neurologically or brain, or even developmentally, no one gives you an instruction manual to really say, well, this is what should happen. Understanding the importance of milestones, understanding brain development, understanding that when a child is very gifted or talented in an area of the brain, or in their life, that they may have vulnerabilities in other areas that may cause struggles, and be able to look out for those types of things. Our daughter, for instance, the big right brain dominant child, I mean, she never really told us about her struggles, but she struggled with reading and she struggled with spelling, and she
because she was a high achiever, because it would take her longer, but she got the marks. She was such a hard worker.
and
She
she
was
had
such a pleaser.
all this terrible anxiety, and she had a right brain form of OCD, and she hid it, not to be mischievous or deceive us in any way, but really because she didn't want us to feel bad, or she didn't want to feel embarrassed. And there were things that we might have been able to see. And this is, before I was really developing a lot of this, but even as I was developing it, I didn't see a lot of this.
But I mean, in all fairness, when we grew up, if you said that you were anxious, your brother would have slapped you across like these things now that are so dissected in children, especially in typical children, you weren't even allowed to talk about. There was no such thing. You couldn't see you were bored. You would have to go clean out some, like there was no such thing. So again, is it behavioral or neurological? I don't know. But I'm talking about the super high functioning kids. But it's different now. Parenthood is different now. They have so much information, but so much misinformation too. But certainly, the kids had good diets. They were athletic. They were into art. Expose your kids to as many things as possible. I probably wouldn't have put our first kid in college because he was a square peg in a round hole. Very bright kid. Full of adventure, but couldn't sit still, and now to this day, he works up in the mountains. He's so happy. He's so free. He creates things. He has a life that he loves. And that's the most important thing also, is just to let your kid be who they are. Like, don't try to make your kid into anybody else. Whoever they are, nurture that, because that's all that matters. That's all that matters, that they're happy.
Especially if you have kids that are creative. There's a point in any parent's life, I think, when the child gets to the point where they're choosing what their path is going to be. Are they going to go to college? What career are they going to go into? And so for most parents, our instinct is we want them to be safe. We want them to earn enough money that they can have a nice place where they live and they can feed themselves and they can survive. And so a lot of parents, the initial instinct is to push their kids to do things that are safe. When you have creative kids or kids that have unique talents, they want to go into careers that aren't safe. Our daughter went into music, and we had people that would tell us all the time, what's she going to do? That's such a hard business. I mean, what's the chances of her actually making it? What's her plan B? And we would say to them, we don't teach our kids to have a plan B, because yes, it is a hard industry. She is very talented though. I mean, she's really talented. She has the skills. We know that. People have said that. But if you have a plan B, you're planning to fail. And it is so hard that if you're not 100% committed, you're never going to make it. And it's hard. If you ask most parents, would you want your child to follow their dream later on in life and, be what they want to be and follow their passion? Or do you want them to have a good job and earn a good living and be safe? Most parents will say, I want them to follow their dream. And then when it comes down to it, and it's like where they're deciding, they're like, no, choose the safe path. And it's really hard not to do that. But I think we were good with this, that we let them be them. We let them take their risks. We let them follow their dreams, all of them. And that's hard to do. And I would say to parents that that's probably the better way to go.
Beyond any diagnosis or difficulty, how would you invite parents to see their child?
Always with the utmost potential, because any of these children that have a right brain strength or left brain strength means they are very, very gifted. And even the nonverbal autistic children that are writing beautiful stories and beautiful poetry, I would just look at them and know that they are gifted and that they're special and that they are able to achieve anything. I mean, this is not an easy program. The people that do it get the results, but there's no magic wand. But these kids are brilliant. And I think the world needs to know that. They don't understand that these kids are brilliant. So, going through the program and doing this and really dedicating yourself, parents are going to see amazing outcomes for their children. So I think they should see that first and know that they will achieve great things.
I think I want them to know right off the bat that it's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. Quite the opposite. They actually gave their child a gift, because the gifts that the child has is really built on the traits, the genetic traits that the parents and the grandparents and the families pass on. We have traits that build height or blue eyes or blonde hair. And those same traits build areas of our brain. And when somebody is talented or gifted or intelligent, what does that mean? It means there are areas of their brain that are just wired stronger. And those are usually traits that run in the family. So, you have a family, Carolyn's family is all incredibly artistic. They're amazing. My family can't do that. My family are good athletes and we write. Other families may be really musical. Another family might have a family of engineers. Those are all different skills that represent different areas of the brain. And the more gifted you are in any of those skills, the more likely you are to have an imbalance in another area. And so if a child usually develops an imbalance, it starts with the fact that you gave them a gift. They are actually uniquely gifted in some area, but they have an imbalance. But that can be changed. So don't listen to anybody that tells you that you can't change it, you can't improve it, and you're not trying to change the child or the person. You're trying to bring out the best version of them, to give them their best opportunity in life and to meet their potential. And as Carolyn said, these kids have incredible potential. So I want the parents to know that they didn't do anything wrong. They gave their child a gift, but there is an issue that needs to be dealt with, and just ignoring it is not going to help. It's not going to go away on its own. And it is something that can be changed significantly.
What happens when parents let go of the idea of who or how their child should be?
It's an interesting question. It's interesting. I don't think anybody that would come to this program would do that, would feel that way. But I think that maybe it's because they're exhausted and maybe a little depressed and maybe insecure about themselves as a parent, because it's so frustrating to help your child when you're not getting the right answers. I don't think they should ever give up. There's so much, even just with the book of doing the programs at home, there's always something that can be done. But if they're giving up on that, I think it's because they're giving up on themselves and they're going through a tough time, which is so understandable.
I remember one of the first non-speaking autistic children I worked with was a kid named Gabriel, and his mother was an amazing writer, super bright woman. And after we had gotten him to start to speak and be able to function at a much higher level, she wrote this letter because he was in a Christmas play in school. And she started off by saying, we had given up on the Harvard dream a long time ago. And on one hand, it was kind of heartbreaking to hear that, but on the other hand, you understood it. I think whether we should or not, parents have dreams for their children. You know, we dream of them living a great life, being successful. We all want them to have relationships. We want them to be healthy. We want them to find love. The number one thing that parents of kids that are really struggling talk about, and Carolyn mentioned this, is they just want their child, they want to know, will my child be loved? Will they ever love anybody? And that, sometimes they give up on that. And so it's not about whether they go to Harvard or not or anything like that. It's about, will they know love in their life? Will they be the best version of who they can be? And I think we try to restore that in real terms. Many of them have given up on that, and they've been told to give up on it. You know, forget about your hopes. This child will never speak. This child will never walk. This child will never do anything. They won't be able to read. That's what they're told. They're given these limitations. They're told to lower their bar for their child, and they lower their bar of their expectations for their child. And they're told that's the only way they can survive. And we try to, through science, through evidence, through what we do every day, try to be able to try to restore those dreams to the parent, and restore their hopes. And that's why my wife got this sign that hope lives here. We believe that restoring hope is also restoring their dreams for their child, for their family.
Because so many people that find Rob, like I said, they're at the end of the rope. There's, you know, they're not. I mean, I'll try to tell a story very quickly, but it's my favorite story about your work. There was this little baby, 2-year-old baby. We were in Amsterdam.
Yes.
And she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, she couldn't sleep for more than an hour. She would just scream. She would drag her body across the floor. She would pull her mother's hair. She would bite her skin till she bled 24 hours a day. And the doctors all said to her, she's going to go into an institution. There is nothing you can do. We'll medicate her, and this is where she'll be for the rest of her life. They heard about somebody who had seen Rob. They got in touch with Rob. We went to Amsterdam. They came from Italy. And the kid is screaming, bloody murder, screaming. And Rob is just, you know, turning her over and doing his what's called your exam, whatever. And when he's done, he just said to the parents, he goes, she'll be fine. And he goes, they were like, what do you mean? Is she going to walk? Is she going to talk? And he goes, yeah, she'll walk and talk. She's just a little underbaked. And they were like, what? And when I say they did everything he said, every time he was in Europe, they went to him. They came to New York. They did everything. And then we just saw her. Now I'm going to cry. A couple of years ago, and she speaks 3 languages. She's beautiful. She's this lovely young girl. It's unbelievable. Like, it's like, what a gift this child is. But what would have happened to her? And that breaks my heart, because a lot of parents are given that kind of information and then they give up when there's just so much that can be done. So anyway, that's my story. I love that story.
It's a great story. I actually, the parent said to me, will she ever speak? And I said, not only will she speak, there's going to be a point when you come to me and you're going to say, can you stop her from talking? She talks. And that exactly happened. She was I had another child that I worked with that went to school with her. And the child came in and said, oh, Ileana is the best in everything in our grade. She's the smartest. She's the best in sports. She's the best artist. And the mom would call me sometimes and be like, okay, I didn't think I'd believe it, but can you stop her from talking? She's talks so much because she's so smart, because she was a genius. I could see right from the beginning this child was brilliant. She was so bright. I could see it in her.
And the mother was so depressed because the baby would just smack her and punch her and bite her. And she took it personally. Of course, she couldn't help herself, but talk about a person that, like, she wasn't going to stop until she found an answer. And thank God she did. Yeah.
How can parents support their children without constantly correcting them?
I don't know that is a bad thing. I think it's all in the presentation. I think as a parent, that is what you do. You correct your children. You don't embarrass them. You don't have to get mad at them. But certainly if you don't do it, how do they know? So I don't think correcting a child is a bad thing at all. I think it's really part that comes with parenthood. But I think if you're doing it in a negative way where it makes the child feel insecure, there's always a delivery for everything. So it's just the way you say it. But I think that's okay to correct your children.
Yeah, I think there's a balance where, as we said, you want to build resilience, and they do that through struggle. So you need them, let them make mistakes, and you need to not make everything okay for them. Let them fall down, let them learn, let them do things over and over and cry and fail, right? Be there, love them, support them. But you also have to set clear boundaries and rules and consequences. I remember, I usually worked at nights with my patients, and I wasn't around for family dinner as much. And then my schedule started to change, and I started to make that more of a priority. And I remember I would sit with my kids and my wife, and they would be, like fighting or yelling or getting up and down. And she would be constantly like, no, sit down, do that, eat your vegetables, do this, hear that. And then she'd play a game with them in the middle of it, like Trivial Pursuit or something. And it was like this balancing act that she was doing so well. And I remember saying to her, wow, I thought, dinner would be this, nice family sitting around, and there was so much like fighting and everything going on. And she said, what made you think that there wasn't going to be any fighting? Like, fighting's what you do as a parent. You fight with them. That's parenting. It's not, happy and we're all going to sit around and have a nice meal every night. It's never like that. And you have to be willing to fight to do that, to make sure that they eat the right food and they eat their vegetables. Yeah, it's a fight, but that's what parenting is about. And correcting your kids, nobody wants to do that. And so she taught me that about, okay, yes, no, you have to be prepared to fight and correct your kids and make sure that you stand strong, at the same time letting them fail and letting them learn on their own and building that resilience.
And also, they get to a certain age and they're at school and they have their lessons, whatever, and then they're at dinner and they're a little hyper. I did play a game with them because all kids love games, and it depended on the ages, and it was like a Trivial Pursuit kind of thing. And no one was allowed to take a bite until they answered the question. So it really did make dinner into a lot of fun because they were all like super hyper or whatever, and it calmed them down. And I do think that making things fun is an important quality, But I mean, if you're sitting at the table and your child's eating with his mouth open, of course I'm going to say, close your mouth.
And she would always say, same thing. She's like, I'm not here to be their friend. I'm not here to be their best friend. I'm their mother. And there are rules and there are things they have to follow. And she would say, over my dead body, is this child not going to be polite? Are they not going to eat and be healthy? I'm not going to have an obese child. Just not going to happen under my watch if I can help it. And that was it. She was a fighter. She's a warrior. She's fighting for her kids. And that taught me a lot about parenthood. And I think the misconception is that you want to be happy and you want to be friends with your children. And that's not really being a great parent, to be honest.
I mean, there are moments. Of course, there are moments.
Of course.
Of course. But,
yes.
But you're the parent, they're the child.
Children need to respect their parents. And what I see now is a lot of kids don't have respect for their parents because the parents aren't giving them consequences and they run the house. The parents need to be the authority figure. There needs to be rules. There needs to be structure. That's what children want. If they don't have that and they feel like they're running the asylum, they feel anxious and they push boundaries to see, like, when are you going to give me a boundary? Because they don't feel safe like that. So there needs to be structure. There needs to be safe, loving boundaries. And that's where kids thrive.
What impact does it have on a child to feel like they constantly need to be fixed?
It has a huge impact on them, which is why I think the awareness now that these kids are brilliant makes them maybe feel better and even, special, because they are. But yes, it's never easy to feel different. It's never easy to have kids make you feel different. It is something I think everybody goes through in life, no matter who you are. I think also sometimes it's harder for the parent than it is for the child. I used to always, one kid came home and they had a difficulty with a kid, I knew the next day they could be best friends. So to be very patient to see how things turn out and not to be so judgmental. But all in all you can do really without spoiling your child is, even kids that have very strong difficulties doing something or terrible attitudes, I always look for the little wins. So your kid might be acting up and always in trouble. Some of these kids just feel like they can't do anything right. Give them a small win. Can you set the table? Oh my God, you did such a beautiful job. Not these big, you didn't do this, you didn't get this done, you didn't. Oh my God, could you make sure, all the lights are turned off in the house? Great job, thank you, that helped me so much. So the, kids that are feeling that they're not good enough, giving them small wins can build their spirit a lot.
Yeah, that's why, we never use terms like fixing or curing or people being broken. We speak in terms of, again, they are here because they're actually gifted and that we're just trying to bring out the best version of them. We're not trying to change them. We're very aware of, and I think the neurodivergent movement overall has been really good in raising awareness of those types of terms. It breaks my heart that anybody in the world feels like they're broken, children or adults. And if you feel broken as a child, you're going to feel broken as an adult. And we have a lot of people walking around this world feeling like they're broken and being told that your only answer is to be medicated. And that's not true. We just want to, again, give them hope. We want to give them real information as to what's going on, why they're struggling in other areas, but they might have other areas that are overactive, and all of it may be causing different symptoms or challenges, but that we can change it. And there's never a point where we can't, and there's never a person that we can't help. People ask me, is there anybody that you've never been able to help? And the answer is no. And we've worked with, I have kids that have drowned in pools and died and were brought back and had such severe brain injury. And even those kids we can help. Not as much as, others, but so we never speak in those terms. We don't think in those terms. We want people to have hope. We want people to know that possibilities are endless with every individual person. And so it kills me to think that a child will feel like they need to be fixed or that they're broken, or an adult. And we want to change that.
What changes in a child when their parents begin to see them from a place of understanding instead of concern?
I think when we give parents real information about this is what's actually happening in the brain, this is why they're acting in a certain way, or this is why they're struggling. And these are realistic things that can be done to change it. And as I said, we do it in a very goal-directed, very specific way. When the parent starts to understand the nature of the issue, and it's not a behavioral problem, or it's not the child just being difficult, or it's not that they did something wrong, or it's not that their child just, is not very bright or doesn't have much talent. They start to look at it in a more hopeful way, and the child starts to feel that from the parent. They start to feel more hopeful. And that's, very important, I think, part of really trying to explain what are the real reasons, really what's happening in the brain, and what are the real expectations, and giving them ways to actually see it change in front of them.
Yeah, no, I think that the more information, again, parent not knowing what these kids are capable of, not knowing the incredible intelligence because they're nonverbal, and maybe not thinking they could hear them or they understood anything, or they just had no idea, knew that kid was brilliant, probably speaks a couple of languages, can read. And I think, Rob says to everyone, talk directly to your child. He can hear you. He understands. I think that awareness for the child must be extraordinary. Even though they can't show it because their body is not in control, that must be the greatest moment of their life because they are so bright and they have so much potential that nobody knew. Nobody knew. It's like kids that flap or stim. It's like someone saying, stop doing that. They don't even know they're doing it. They don't even have any control over it. So I think the child feeling that the parents understanding them, it's got to be also almost like a telepathic thing. Like it must feel beautiful.
We had one mom here who actually is one of the people that invested in this center here. And she spoke yesterday to the audience, and she said that when she was able to realize what their child was truly capable of and how much they actually knew that the child previous to seeing us wasn't able to show, it changed her whole attitude about autism, about her child, and that changed the whole attitude in the home. Everything. It changed the relationship with the mom and dad. It changes everything. And so, that's really important, obviously.
How can parents trust that their child has their own path, even if it's not the one they expected?
That, again, like letting a child be who they want to be and supporting that child's choice, as long as it's not dangerous. Our oldest son, he's a free spirit. He needs to be out in nature. He likes building. He likes to be hands-on. My husband offered him a position in a company, wonderful salary, everything. And he said no. And I respect that because he loves what he does. He's so happy. So, if you're not supporting your child, you're kind of hurting their soul a little bit. So, it's a fine line. Yes, if your child says, I want to be something absolutely ridiculous that you don't, like so many kids nowadays, I want to be a video game designer because they just want to play video games. So they're, you kind of have to. But I do think that when a child shows talent and interest and passion, that you shouldn't squash that. It's really important for them to feel that in their life.
Yeah, I think you need to expose them to everything, give them a chance at everything, because you never know. If Tiger Woods' father at 3 never showed him a golf club, he would have never realized that he could become the greatest golfer ever, right? He would never be there. If Michael Jordan never picked up a basketball. So you want to expose them to things that you don't know, and you want to, let them choose what they like. But also, if they're really good at certain things, if you can try to lead them down that road in a gentle way, but not push them too hard, because that can also kill their passion. You have to let it be very organic and natural. And what I've seen also is that, a lot of parents are overly so. They try to push their child so hard and they kill any passion that they're having. And the bottom line is that when you look at anybody that succeeds at a very high level, very few of them were really forcibly trained to do something when they were young. They just have a gift and they have a talent, and then they love it, and they eventually did it and pursued it and became really good at it. But they need to ultimately drive it. The parent can't drive that passion. You can't manufacture passion in your child.
Many parents worry about their children's future. What would you say to bring them some peace of mind?
You can't worry about these things. Yes, I mean, I guess if I had a child with a severe disability, and I would wonder what would happen to them if they were still dependent, I guess that is something that you would have to set up and really think about long term. You'd have to, but Rob's all about manifestation. Put all your positive energy into the greatest life that this child can have and manifest it. Be like, this child has a gift, and I don't know what I'll do, but I will find a way for this kid to use his gift and to have a great life. Like, that's all you can do. I mean, with any child, that you can't control anything in life, but you can always put your biggest heart forward and try to lead with that. If you lead with negativity, I don't care what your situation is, you'll never be happy. So you may as well wish for the best.
On the other hand, there's really valid fears. When I talk to parents about when they have a child that's really impaired, that may not be verbal or really struggles with emotional regulation or whatever, their biggest fear is, what happens when I'm not here? What if we die? What's going to happen to this child or this person? Or when they're adult, are they going to be homeless on the street? And who's going to take care of them? And those are real legitimate fears. And the answer is that you need to try to eliminate or reduce the problem. You need to address the actual root cause of the issues. And most of those are completely changeable. And the earlier you do it, the better the long-term outcome. And especially if you realize that your child is struggling because they are gifted and they can be incredibly successful later on in life, if we deal with this issue and we really are aggressive and we're consistent and we're persistent. And as she said, it's not magic. It's not a magic wand. It's hard work. But that if you don't do the work now, it's going to be even harder later. And those are real issues, when they get to a point where you have to worry about legal issues or drug issues or suicide issues, or, again, if we're not here, what's going to happen with them? Those can be legitimate fears. And the only answer is to really deal with it as early as you can and do it until you get them to the best position possible. And in almost every case, that's possible.
If you could share just one message with parents about their children, what would it be?
Dream big.
Yeah, I like that. Don't place any limitations. No matter what you're dealing with now, anything is possible. Everything can change. But the other thing is that realize that your children are looking at you. And I've never met a parent when I asked them who didn't say to me, I want my child to be happy. I want them a healthy relationship. I want them to be in love. I want them to work in a career that they love and that they're passionate about and they make a lot of money. And, I want them to be healthy and, live a good, long life and be happy. And I often say to the parents, well, are you that? Right? If you're unhappy and you're healthy and you hate your job and you don't have a good relationship and you're overweight and sitting on the couch and taking Prozac, that's what your child's most likely going to be like. They're watching you. So you need to work hard. You need to realize that you are the example and that you can be anything. If you want your child to realize that they can manifest anything, you have to set that example. They need references in life. I often, in a room full of doctors from around the world, maybe some of the best in the world, I'll often ask questions. I say, how many of you have had a relationship with anybody in your life, family, non-family, whatever, that is truly great at what they do, that world class in what they do? And in a room of maybe 100 doctors, there maybe will be 10 that will raise their hand. And then I'll often ask them, okay, well, how many of you is it a member of your family? And it's maybe 2. And every once in a while I'll then ask and I'll say, who is it? And one of them may say, it was my father. It was my mother. And I say, imagine being that person and that's your child and someone's asking them the question. And they raise their hand and say, it was my mom, my dad. And that's the influence that you can have on your children. But it takes effort. It takes hard work. It takes intention. It doesn't happen by magic. And I think both of us have always known that. My wife is world class in anything she's ever done, literally, like art, jewelry. I've worked very hard to be the best in the world at what I do. That these centers and our method is the best in the world. There is nothing better than what we do. And I'm not saying that out of ego, I'm saying it out of fact. But
well, you can't ask your child something to do that you're not willing to do yourself. You can't say, oh, you can have McDonald's, but when they grow up, I want them to eat organic and be good. You have to teach them young. And
you teach by example. You can't, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
It's what you do. It's cooking with them. A lot of children with, atypical situations, they can cook, they can cut, they can help, they can organize, teaching children to do things for themselves, cook and clean and even sew. Like, these are wonderful gifts that you end up giving your children. They can do anything. They can do anything. And, you got to walk your talk.
But you need to be the example of that. You need to be the embodiment of unlimited potential in some way, or at least be doing your best to do that. They're always watching you, whether you know it or not. They're watching you, and they're going to be you. So be careful.
Better version of you. Better version.